Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for stopping in today. So today we're going to be talking about a concept that comes to us from personality psychology. Now, I myself studied personality psychology for many years in graduate school, and a concept that I see coming up time and time again with people is this notion of personality versus identity, and exactly what is the difference. I mean, these are the same things, right? Just kind of different words for the same concept? Wrong. These are not the same things, at least in terms of how personality scientists actually think about these concepts. They are actually quite different. Basically, personality psychologists want to understand what makes people unique. Personality psychologists study what are called individual differences, so ways in which people are different from one another. So personality and identity are both different ways of looking at how people are different or unique from one another. But they are separate concepts and they're also studied very differently. So let's go ahead and break it down. So first, let's start with personality. Personality is basically patterns of people's behavior, their thoughts, their feelings over long periods of time. Personality tends to be pretty stable in the long term and in the short term, but personality is not a rigid or stable concept. People can and do change, but generally speaking, the person that you are today is going to be pretty similar to who you are tomorrow and next week and next month and so on and so forth. So think of all the different adjectives that you could use to describe what a person is like. And I'm not talking about like physical characteristics. I'm talking about a person's internal characteristics. So somebody might be outgoing or funny or laid back, reserved, emotional or friendly. There's all these different types of adjectives that you can use to describe somebody. And all of these different concepts make up personality, just broadly speaking, right? So they describe a person's kind of overlaying patterns of how they tend to be every single day across different types of situations and with different people. Now, personality tends to be studied through what is called the Big Five personality traits. I'll go ahead and link my video to that right here for you if you haven't seen it yet. And the Big Five are made up of openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So usually personality is studied through these five kind of broad traits. But personality is also much more than just these five traits. It's also a person's patterns of well-being. So how emotionally healthy are they? We can also look at things like their emotional patterns. So do they tend to be very happy types of people, or do they tend to be more upset types of people, and so on. So personality is basically all of these different kinds of ideas that make up how a person is unique in terms of their internal characteristics, so not their external. Personality really doesn't have much to do with your physical appearance. So very importantly, in personality science, your personality is not a personal concept. And I realize that might sound kind of confusing, so let me go ahead and explain what I mean. When we study personality as personality scientists, we do look at how you interpret your own personality. So we would probably give you what's called a self-report. So you would be filling out an assessment, answering different questions about how you see yourself and your own personality. So you get to assess yourself. But ideally, we would also be asking other people who know you fairly well to also assess your personality. So it's not just about how you see your own personality, although that is certainly a part of personality. By getting other perspectives, so for example, maybe a family member's perspective, a coworker's perspective, a friend's perspective, we're getting all these other perspectives of what you are like. And the idea here is that you, the person assessing your own personality, you know certain things about you that may not be readily apparent to other people, because we don't always say all of our thoughts out loud, right? I hope not. We don't always tell people how we're feeling all of the time. There may be some behaviors that we kind of hold back, maybe because they wouldn't be appropriate for certain situations. So there's lots of information that other people don't necessarily have about us. But on the other hand, there's going to be things about ourselves that we don't really realize. So this is where the other perspectives come in. By having other people evaluate your personality, we're getting those other perspectives about patterns in your behavior that you might not even realize are there. Because let's face it, people are inherently biased. When we fill out these types of assessments, we obviously want to put ourselves in the best light possible. And because we're always stuck inside our own heads, we don't always realize all of the different things that we actually do. There may be parts of our behavior or our emotional responses or the things that we say that we think come across one way, but actually they're coming across a different way. And when it comes to personality, we are interested in that. So it's not just your own personal perspective of what you're like, it's also other people's perspectives of what you're like. And we would ask people who know you fairly well, because obviously we want information from people who have had a lot of interaction with you and who have seen you in different types of situations and across time. So it's not just how you see your own personality. Personality is much broader. It's also how other people see your patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And what's kind of interesting here with personality is, let's move back to the big five here. If you take two different people and let's say they score very similarly in terms of the big five personality traits, they're still two different people. Let's say they score almost exactly the same. So just because you have a similar personality to somebody else does not make you the same person. So what sets these people apart? What is it that's making them different? If not personality, then what? Well, one of the big pieces here that sets people apart beyond just personality is personal identity. So the second big topic of this video. So identity can be thought of as who a person is, but now it is inherently personal. So identity is everything that makes you, you. It's everything about who you are from your own perspective. It can include your own notion of your own personality. So yes, it can include personality as part of that assessment, but it also includes other really important things about who you are, including how you would identify or describe yourself, those things that you think are especially important about who you are. It's the experiences in your life that have really shaped who you are and the way that you describe your path in life. It's the most meaningful moments in your life that you would describe to somebody in terms of what has made you, you today. It's all of these different parts of you, as described by you. Identity is an inherently personal concept in comparison to personality, which is defined, yes, by you, but also by other people. When we study identity, we usually study it, when it comes to personality science, through people's life stories. So we're not handing them an assessment and they're just filling out questions. No, we talk to them. We ask them these very personal, open-ended questions about their life that you can answer however you want. So we will ask people about their own life journey, the things that have shaped them, the things that are important to them, to really get a better sense of who they are, not just in terms of their patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behavior, but deeper than that, more personal and intimate than that. And as you might have guessed, this is way harder to study than personality. With personality, we can just hand them an assessment of the big five personality traits and maybe ask a couple of other people who know you really well to fill out the same measures about you, and we can call it a day. But with identity, we have to sit down with you. We have to interview you. You can answer these questions however you want. It could take you 2 minutes to answer a question. It could take you 45 minutes to answer a question, right? It's so much more open-ended with identity because it is so much more inherently personal. And unlike personality, where you can have two people who score pretty much exactly the same in terms of their personality traits, with identity, no two people are going to answer exactly the same way because we are all different people. No two people are exactly the same, and identity really highlights that. So what's the difference? Let me break it down for you. So first and foremost, personality, despite the term, is not inherently personal. We do have to get multiple perspectives to get a really good idea of what a person is like in terms of their personality traits. Identity, on the other hand, is inherently personal. We would not ask other people about your own identity. We would only ask you, and we would ask much more personal, intimate questions about who you are and what's shaped you in your life compared to personality. Personality is also really easily studied in terms of science because we can just give somebody a measure and call it a day, but with identity we actually have to interview them, and answers can be so much more open-ended and therefore difficult to analyze scientifically. Another major difference between the two is that personality, so what a person is like, just kind of generally speaking, can be figured out pretty easily. And now I'm talking about just in your day-to-day life when you're interacting with somebody. Let's say that you're meeting somebody for the first time, like maybe you bump into them at a coffee shop or on the elevator and you strike up a conversation. You can figure out that person's personality pretty easily without a whole lot of interaction. There are some personality traits that we can figure out just by looking at a picture of somebody. And there are other personality traits that only take a couple of minutes to really get a good idea of for a specific person. Of course, there are some personality traits that do take longer than this, but just generally speaking, even just by spending, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes with a person, we can figure them out at least somewhat in terms of personality. And this is because there are some personality traits that are just more inherently going to be on display, that have more what we call behavioral manifestations. So they are more external. People display them through their behaviors, through their clothing choice, through the things that they do and say. There are some personality traits that are just like that. So it's much easier to figure out at least some parts of personality pretty quickly. So to demonstrate this, I want you to think about your coworkers. Unless you are the life of the party, there are probably at least some coworkers that you don't know that well and you've really only seen them at work. But you still have at least some idea of who they are, even just having seen them in that very specific situation and not really having a lot of personal conversations with them. You can still get at least somewhat of a good idea of what their personality is like. Now on the flip side, identity is not like this at all. Okay, with identity, you need a long time to really figure out who a person is. Not just in terms of their personality, but much broader, much more personal than this. So this requires getting to know somebody on a much more intimate level, and that just takes time. Unless you are talking to the most open person in the world, okay? You're not going to know somebody's identity really at all within the first couple of minutes, unless they are choosing to share that with you, which is very rare. And this is because identity includes aspects that don't normally come out in a regular conversation. These very personal types of life experiences that have really shaped somebody, that's probably not going to come up within the first 5 or 10 minutes of talking to somebody. And here's the thing with identity. You can know somebody for a really long time, but not really know their identity. So knowing somebody for longer doesn't even guarantee that you're going to know certain things about a person unless you ask them and they're willing to share that information with you because it is so personal. So you might not even know somebody's identity even if you've known them for 20 years. You're going to have a better shot at knowing their identity, don't get me wrong, but it's not a guarantee. So I want you to think back to your coworkers. Once again, unless your coworkers are just the most open people in the world, or you are the most sociable person in the world, right? You're not going to know your coworker's identity because it is so personal. Chances are, in your work environment, that type of thing just doesn't come up, right? You really do have to put in the effort to get to know somebody and have them open up enough to really get to know those very personal, intimate parts of them. So what's so great about personality versus identity is that it really highlights the fact that people have all of these different layers to them. And the more personal the layer, the more difficult it becomes to study scientifically, but also for just us as people to actually know about somebody else. So personality is kind of one of the more topmost layers of somebody. It's relatively easy to study scientifically, and as people, it's pretty easy to get to know somebody's personality. But identity is one of the more innermost layers. It's difficult to study scientifically, and as people, it takes a lot of work to get to know somebody's identity because of the inherently intimate nature of it. So that wraps up the concept of personality versus identity in personality psychology. I have linked in the description box down below a blog post that I wrote about this subject that goes into a little bit more detail. Check that out if you're interested in this topic. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, ding that notification bell, and of course, please make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already, if you want more psychology-related content. I look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, take care.